Good morning and welcome everyone to our June DE&I Next Practices monthly call. Happy Pride. We kicked this morning off with the perfect song, I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross. We're really excited to have all of you on this call today. A quote for the day is, "The more I've been able to learn about gay rights and equal pay and gender equity and racial inequality, the more that it all intersects. You really can't pick it apart. It's all intertwined." So I think that quote is just going to set a beautiful tone for today. And we're going to dive into that just a little bit more with our speaker. Welcome to all of our members that are on the call. Our I4CP membership just continues to grow. We're so grateful to all of the members and non-members who contribute to our research. If you're not a part of membership yet, please go ahead and reach out to us and join us for many of our other events that are exclusive to members only. With that, we're going to preview just a little bit of research that we have recently published. So we partnered with Fortune magazine to dive into this really incredible piece of research called the Talent Imperative. This is a conversation that's coming up in almost every single call that we're having with members on how you are all responding to this hyper competitive talent market. Again, this is for members only, but please reach out to us, reach out to your membership director to find more, and we welcome having conversations with you about this research. Today's call facilitators, including myself, are Eric Davis. He's our creative director and senior editor here at I4CP. And the call is going to be facilitated by Jackie Robertson. She's the chair of our CDO board and now the chief inclusion officer at the Cleveland Clinic. If you don't have the rest of our DE&I Next Practice series calls on your calendar yet, please get those on. We want to see you. We want to continue our conversations month to month, or sign up for any of our other weekly calls that we have during this time slot. We cover a lot of information and we love to share that all with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. Love those suspenders, by the way. Very cool.
Thank you.
So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Have a few comments I'd like to share with you before we open up today's call with our featured speaker, Beck Bailey. I'm really excited about interviewing him today. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Just want to remind you all to just really engage, ask questions, come off mute, put comments in the chat. As Nina said, we really want to hear from you. But here's something that's top of mind for me today. How much is too much? Everything in moderation. Too much of a good thing is bad. So if too much of a good thing is bad, does that mean too much of a bad thing is good? Has the news been bad lately? Or are we too focused on the bad news and focus too little on the good? Well, let's take a quick inventory and you be the judge. Putin unleashed the biggest war in Europe since World War II with the justification that modern Western-leaning Ukraine was a constant threat and Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist. The economy contracted at a 1.4% annual rate in the first 3 months of the year. The environment, well, while 2021 was certainly cooler than 2016, the hottest year on record, it was warmer than anyone recorded in the year prior to 2015. Have we made strides in the state of social justice? Consider the 4 pillars of social justice: equity, access, participation, and rights. We could devote an entire session and speaker to that particular topic. Healthcare preliminary data shows that 3.4 million people died in 2021, 13% more than in 2019. Top 3 causes: heart disease, cancer, COVID-19, accounted for 50% of those deaths. And then there's monkeypox. Wait, is COVID over yet? 27 school shootings so far this year, and the year is only half over. The most recent Texas school shooting was the deadliest since Sandy Hook in 2012. Since 2012, what has been done about it? Just yesterday, 3 people were killed, multiple injured, In shooting on the hospital campus, the suspect is reported as dead. National Rifle Association, NRA. Guns don't kill people, people do. Most Americans support gun reform. NRA had their convention this past weekend. It's interesting. No guns were allowed at the convention when the former 45th president was speaking. But wait, don't they believe guns don't kill people? People do. All right, maybe I'm a little snarky on that particular point. NCAA this year abandoned its rules that have allowed trans athletes to compete since 2011. Laws that ban trans women and girls from participating in sports are getting more and more common. 22 states have introduced bills to do just that. All in a news cycle, you say, followed by pharma commercials urging us to tell our doctors what drugs they should prescribe for us. Now, I know it's important to advocate for our own health, but could these commercials be taking things a bit too far? Have you ever wondered why every other commercial is an ad for a medication that you probably don't need? I listened recently to an advertisement for medications to treat psoriasis and eczema, diseases that affect people of color disproportionately, yet you don't see many people of color portrayed in these ads. I read recently that the people who could benefit the most from these medications, non-whites, are less likely to receive them. Wait, why am I even giving this commercial one iota of mental real estate? I'm on overload here. You know, there used to be a time where talking about politics and current events was energizing, and I'm not sure that's the case today. You've all heard the expression, everything in moderation, too much of anything is bad for you. Well, does that include the news? Because I don't know about you, but I think I'm on overload. I had dinner with friends the other day, and one commented that one of the things he enjoyed most about that dinner was that there was no conversation on current events. Could we be oversaturated with current events? Could we be overwhelmed with the endless stories about which either nothing is being done to rectify the situation, as in the many dozens of school shootings, or the very laws that protect many of us are being undermined? So why am I saying all of this? What can we do as leaders, as DE&I leaders in this space? Many of you have heard me refer to my auntie, wise and calm in her 9th decade of living, by the way. Many of us have people we turn to when we're challenged to make sense of something in our lives. And perhaps you turn to prayer, a higher power, a trusted confidant, a family member or friend. I leverage all these relationships, but I find the practical sage wisdom from my auntie to be spot on in most instances. So I had a recent conversation with her, and I asked, what do you do when news cycles seem to be out of control? Same negative stories, no progress, auntie. What do you do? She said, I turn off the news and I play bingo. I smiled and I decided to ask a more existential question. So, auntie, our organization is a microcosm of our society, and we need people, leaders, to be role models for diversity and inclusion. They need to know how to manage different people, personalities, backgrounds. They need to be very self-aware of their biases. But auntie, is this possible that our people leaders are just as divided on some issues as our greater society? What should I do? She paused and she said, I've been around a long time, and I've seen many things that maybe I shouldn't have seen or experienced as a young girl, but I did. First of all, things are pretty riled up right now in this world, and you're trying to solve too many things in one day. She said, now listen to me. She said, you know my neighbor up the street, Mr. Gilmore? Yes, auntie. She continued, he was one of the most racist, bigoted people I know. But you know, life experiences change people. His daughter Mary married a young Black man. She said he graduated from the Air Force Academy, nice, smart young man, but that didn't matter to Mr. Gilmore because his heart was filled with hate. She went on to say he tried to disown her, but a year later they had a son. Clinton Mary had a baby boy. She said he was cute as he could be. And as much as Mr. Gilmore tried to deny that grandbaby boy, he couldn't. And his heart softened. But the whole thing took years off his life because he stressed about it. She said, for what, I don't know. She said, people love who they love. So that's it. That's the story, auntie. She said, that's part of the story. She said, just listen. She said, you move too fast. She said, just sit and listen. She continued. About 2 years later, she said, Mr. Gilmore's son, Ron, went through one of those operations. Now, my auntie is 90, okay? Mr. Gilmore's son, Ron, she said, went through one of those operations, and now his name is Rachel. She said, so I guess you say her name is Rachel, right? I acknowledged. She said, well, it darn near killed Mr. Gilmore. Took a few more years off his life, I expect. So what happened? Well, Rachel is doing really well, successful career. He tried to disown her too, but Rachel was always so sweet and kind. He couldn't deny her. And that kindness didn't go away, she said, just because she went through a transition. She said, is that what you call it? I said, close enough, Auntie. Well, anyway, she continued, Mr. Gilmore started to come around. His heart softened. And not only that, he started speaking up for people. He got involved in local politics here in the county. She said, experiences change people, you know, and sometimes for the good. I said, that's a nice story, Auntie. She said, if you just listen, I'll answer the question on what to do. What you need to do, she said, is a little homework. Everybody or nearly everybody where you work has had something like this in their lives, where their beliefs have been tested one way or another. Those experiences make people look at issues differently. Sometimes they understand things better. Their hearts soften. For these people at your job, she says, make them champions or ambassadors. She says, is that what you call them? I was amazed that she really remained current with the language in the DE&I space. She said, let them speak on your behalf. Give them something important to do in your company. And if you've got 50 of them saying and role modeling all the important things, how much farther ahead would you be in your job? Spoken from a 90-year-old. Thank you, Auntie. So there you have it. I know several business leaders with whom I've had lunch, and they've shared many personal challenges that were life-altering. Their kids are on the spectrum. Their kids married someone from a different race, ethnicity, or religion. Their teen or niece or nephew transitioned. Their grandchild has an intellectual disability. It's amazing the personal life stories people will share with you if you listen, and how those experiences have changed their perspectives in some way. They often tell me that they're committed to doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And my auntie was right. Why not leverage them as ambassadors and give them purposeful, meaningful work in each of our organizations? As we ended the conversation, I asked my auntie, how did you become so wise? She said, just live long enough and survive the bad things. Recognize and have enough sense to appreciate the good in your life. Make time to enjoy those you love. But most important, she said, with conviction and finality, turn off that TV every now and then and go play bingo. So with that, I am excited for our guest speaker today, Beck Bailey, who is the Managing Director of I&D at Accenture. Beck, I am so excited to have you today and share what I know of you with this audience. So welcome, Beck.
Thank you so much. And I want to meet your auntie.
I
want to hang out with her.
She is great. She is absolutely great. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited about this conversation, Beck. First of all, I absolutely love the song. Talk to us a little bit, because the whole point is obviously for this audience to get to know you a little bit more, to understand some of the practices at Accenture, some of the DE&I best practices that you're engaging in. But before we get there, let's have this audience get to know a little bit about who Beck Bailey is. So talk to me about why you chose the song. I think it's so appropriate.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that quote. Very compelling and very insightful.
Yeah, thinking about the song, and when the team asked me for a song, I think it's such an incredible anthem for the LGBTIQ plus community. But I find myself, as I grow older and each year kind of goes by, I think a lot about, I just get more reflective, right? And That song for me goes back to when I first came out in 1982. And I came out at that time as a lesbian. I was assigned female at birth and raised as a girl. And I was in college, and I went to a college in Southwestern Virginia. And every Saturday night, we used to, find someone who had a car, and we'd all pile in the car and drive about an hour and a half to the big city to go to the gay bar. And at that time, the bar was in an industrial district. There were no signs. Like, you had to know it was there or you couldn't find it. And to get in, you had to buzz a bell and be, peeped at by the people inside to make sure that you were in the right place. And then they would buzz you in one door, and then there was another door, right, to protect everybody inside. And the reason for that is the gay bashers would come down to that neighborhood and drive up and down the street in front of the bar, because some of them figured out where it was anyway. And they would harass people and beat people and even kill people who were on their way in or out of the bar. And so all of the security was to make sure that, we didn't let anybody inside that was going to hurt us. And, what I remember is like being inside, and we were safe, right? Like, that was our family. These were our people. And that song was only a couple of years old at that time, and was already an anthem for our community. And it would come on, and the whole place like just would shake the rafters. Everybody would sing every word, and almost sing every word with the fist in the air, like I'm coming out, right? Like, despite you, I am going to come out, and I am going to find my way, and people are going to know my worth, right? And, at that time, you couldn't have told us that there'd be same-sex marriage. You couldn't have told us that, you certainly couldn't have told us that we would be out at work, that our companies would have policies and practices and benefits meant to attract and retain us. That wouldn't have been part of our vision at that time. And so in my reflection, when I think about that song, I still love that song, still want to like shout it from the rooftops. But I also think about that journey, even over the 40 years of my being out, of lots of progress and lots to celebrate, and still some areas of challenge. And I felt like it was the right song for today, not only just in and of itself, but even reflective of who I am as a person and the journey that I've taken.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. You talked about a lot has changed in terms of, you never thought that people would be out at work. Accenture has always seemed to me to be a little ahead of the pack and a little ahead of the pack. Can you talk to us a little bit about, first of all, what you do at Accenture, but also what are some of the things, initiatives, programs that Accenture is taking on, and do you perceive them as still being ahead of the pack?
Oh, such a great question. Well, I'll start with my role. I am a managing director on our global inclusion and diversity team, and we really sit in that center of excellence model. So myself and my team are sitting at the center, working out our strategy, aligning our strategy with the business, and then building programmatic and tactical interventions to then hand over and kind of push out and enable into our business. And that's, for us, that's across 120 countries, nearly 700,000 employees. And so, we're kind of then pushing it out to be adopted and localized and made relevant to the various stakeholders around the globe that make up Accenture. I will say I've only been at Accenture a year and a half. Some of the folks on the line may know me from my prior role at the Human Rights Campaign, where I helped companies with their LGBTQ inclusive policies, practices, and benefits as kind of a consulting NGO kind of partner. And I'll tell you, it's no, working in that role, it's no, it's no small thing for when I went to kind of think about moving back into the private sector. That had been my life before working at HRC. That I chose Accenture. I really felt it was a company that not only has this unwavering commitment to inclusion, diversity, and equity, but is living it and walking it. And that doesn't mean we get everything right every day, but it means that when we don't get it right, we fix it. And that I really believe in the commitment that we have and the progress that we're making. When I think about, what we're doing today, whether it's on race and ethnicity, on our efforts for gender parity and equity, a lot of the work that we're doing with persons with disabilities or with our LGBTQI family, I do think we lead from the front, but I think we also really seek out opportunities like I4CP to learn from our peers, because none of us have all the answers on this stuff, right? And the minute you think you do, you probably need to exit. So it's good to have, I think, our leadership mentality, but it's also good to have the humility of this work and approach it with a dose of humility if you want to, keep making progress.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I think many of our organizations are trying to do a better job is of tracking different demographics, gender identity being one of those.
Yeah.
Certainly want to engage you more in terms of what Accenture is doing, but I want to take this opportunity first to pass the mic to Eric, who is going to provide some polling questions for tracking gender identity. So Eric, I'm going to pass it to you, and certainly we want to follow up to understand what Beck is doing in this regard at Accenture, but I hand it to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so this question, it's sort of a repeat of an I4CP study we did in 2020, right before the pandemic hit, where we were talking about how companies are dealing with gender fluidity and what policies and practices they're putting in place around it. So this one was, does your organizations include gender identity, e.g. non-binary or trans, in its employee demographic tracking? And while we're waiting for people to answer that, Beck, I was wondering, you told us in our prep call that Accenture has a Pride scorecard. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of factors you're measuring on that scorecard?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So our Pride scorecard is our own kind of internal dashboard to look at how we're progressing our LGBTIQ plus initiatives across all of the countries in which we're doing business. And we have set it up as, it's about 60 questions. It's in 4 pillars. Those pillars are leadership, talent, culture, and external engagement. And so as an example, under leadership, we might have questions like, do you have, does your network have an executive sponsor? Do you have openly LGBTIQ plus leaders within that market or country? Under talent, we have things like self-identification for sexual orientation and gender identity, how we're promoting it, how much uptake you're getting in people actually identifying. We ask things about, do you have and promote LGBTIQ plus mentoring? Do you have specific recruitment efforts to the community? And then on our culture, you see a lot of our ERG and network activity. Do you have a network? Are they active? Are they hosting events? What percentage of your team are allies? Do you have a dedicated budget for the network or ERG? That's a key question. Because we are in that kind of centralized, decentralized model, every country has their own budget. So we're influencing that. But by this metric, we're asking, does this particular segment or population have a piece of your budget? And then we look at utilization of our same-sex and transgender benefits. And the reason we don't necessarily look for how much utilization there is. It's almost a yes/no question. And we just see that as a real culture indicator. It might be indicators of some other things too, which we can talk about in a minute, but you have these benefits. Are people actually using them? Do they feel safe and comfortable stepping forward and using them? And so we publish that scorecard every 6 months. And honestly, what we're doing is leveraging some of that natural competitiveness that business likes to foster and have our countries kind of look at each other and see where they are in relation to each other. We have some other real-time dashboards that our folks can access at any time, but the scorecard is that biannual measurement that folks pay a lot of attention to and is a way to kind of measure penetration.
I'm going to jump in with just a question from the audience that tails into this. Dale Bernstein wanted to know how you handle global LGBTQI policy if you have entities in countries where it remains illegal to do that tracking. Do you state your global policy without caveats, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think there I'll parse a few pieces, right? So one is our global non-discrimination and code of conduct policies, where they are uniform, regardless of country, regardless of a country's laws, which state, that we have zero tolerance for discrimination and include sexual orientation and gender identity within the enumerated classes within that statement. And that also our global code of conduct holds for non-discrimination, anti-harassment, and so on. And, in that case, there's nothing in laws in any country that would prevent a company from having their own inclusive non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy within the walls of their business. So that's one. When you get to self-identification, data collection, and data privacy, obviously we're getting in a whole nother, can of wax. And there, I think our approach is first, do no harm, right? So we take a look at the legal and social context country by country. And if it is illegal to collect that data, we don't collect it. If it is legal, but there are strong social or maybe even religious questions about the safety of our people in gathering and holding that data, then we may not collect it either. And that really is, an evaluation that is our legal team, our data privacy team, but also members of our ERG and partners in the NGO space to really come to an informed consensus on how to approach that.
That's great that you bring up the self-identification, because I was also wondering, it's like, what do you do to encourage self-identification at Accenture? Because I know that's something that we deal with our Chief Diversity Officer board a lot. People are always asking, at what stages should we be asking people to self-identify? How do you encourage? How do you let people know that it's more about the services that we can provide to them rather than information that we're trying to gather for any other reason?
It's tough, right? I mean, I think people are, and rightly so, sensitive about their data. We live in a world where our data is being captured and perhaps misused around us quite a bit. If I look at the spam in my personal email box, it's pretty intense, right? So I think, individual skepticism is a very real thing that we just need to address. Now, for us, it is a bit of, it's a messaging battle, right? And I think a little bit of the trick for me is how do we get it out of the silos of like an I&D initiative or even an ERG or network initiative and more into regular conversations about talent and our people and how to care for our people. And so for me, that means, one, we do include it in new joiner orientation that everyone who joins Accenture goes through. And it's part of that new joiner orientation where we talk about our commitment to inclusion and diversity. We talk about our policies. We talk about where to get access to resources. And then we talk about the amazing benefits and engagement opportunities we have for people from different communities. And we say, look, self-identification is a way for us to know more about you so that we can fine-tune those benefits, fine-tune those opportunities, really make sure we're doing the best by you. And so we give the business case for it, right? And the personal case for it. We do also talk about how we manage data privacy at Accenture, what we will and won't do, who can see what, the layers that we go through. So I think I think it's a few things, it's getting it out of kind of just preaching to the converted, meaning, if it's just the LGBTIQ ERG telling me to self-ID my sexual orientation and gender identity, it's never going to get past that bubble. And secondly, tell people what you're using it for. And thirdly, tell them how you're safeguarding their data and how you're protecting it and more importantly, perhaps what you won't use it for. And you just have to be able to have those conversations and build them into natural intersections along the employee life cycle.
I've got a couple of questions here on how you're using that data towards meeting your DE&I goals. Are those being tracked on a quarterly basis? Like, what are the mechanisms in terms of how you use that data to push those goals forward?
Yeah, so currently we are piloting representation goals for the LGBTIQ community in 8 countries where we're developing more robust workforce representation goals. I think it's a little bit, there's some chicken egg in there, right? Like we need deeper penetration and uptake of self-ID in order to create more meaningful goals. So we've been really, more focused on penetration and comfort of people self-IDing before we get to saying, okay, we have, X% of people from this community, and now we want Y%. Now we're starting to go down that road, but our focus has been largely on, really getting people comfortable. Now in our disclosures, we have global disclosures and then we have disclosures by country and region. This year in the United States, when we do our US workforce disclosure, it will include a non-binary column. We've always reported the number of people who identify as LGBTIQ plus in our US disclosure. So there's some differences as we go around the globe, whether from our own reporting or compulsory reporting. I think the thing is always moving towards the very best we can do. And for me, when I was talking to our people here, I said, look, hold this as your North Star, right? Let's always envision to see people the way they see themselves. And if we can find ways to ask people, how do you see yourself, right? Who are you? And then report out or, make efforts to meet those people where they are and how they see themselves. That's the goal that we want to have and be a little bit, creating some distinction between like someone's legal identity and who they actually see themselves to be.
All right. So I can actually drill down quite a bit more on this particular topic too, because I know that things like leaders sharing stories, like the leader is out sharing their stories and making sure that helps create a safe space. leaders with disabilities, making sure that they're communicating, helps with self-ID and things like that.
Yep.
We also had a question here from one of my colleagues who said, wanted to know your thoughts about assertions that an individual's sexuality is none of their employer's business. And that's from Lori Likens. Lori, did you want to come off? Did you have any other context for that one?
Just that it's come up in some conversations that I've had with our DE&I exchange members that, you know, what are the lines between gender identity, sexual orientation? Do we even need to be having conversations about sexual orientation in the workplace? What are the boundaries, or should there be boundaries? I'm just curious about Beck's POV on this one.
Yeah. So
Thanks.
I love this question. I love it. I think the first thing is, you know, what I see as kind of where our unconscious bias sits in this question. Like, so for me, we already talk about sexual orientation in the workplace all the time. We just talk about straight people's sexual orientation in the workplace all the time, right? We collect data on whether you're married or not. We collect data on the gender of your partner, and in order to enroll them in benefits and all sorts of things, right? So for me, part of the question is, you know, what people are really asking is, you know, why are we talking about, you know, gay people or lesbians and their sexual orientation in the workplace? So I think like that's part of it. And there are certainly people who, for their own reasons, you know, private or otherwise, will never want to self-disclose, and that's great, right? Like we always have prefer not to say if you don't want to self-disclose. But at the end of the day, if I'm thinking about providing, you know, benefits that are relevant to all of my people, you know, there are a lot of benefits that are particularly relevant to people who are in same-sex relationships, people who are transgender, that unless you know they're there and what their needs are, you know, you're not going to address those. So I guess for me, it's a little bit like, you know, from the data side, it's a little bit like, yeah, you know, we want to know more about our people so we can really make the most robust programs, right? If you're not measuring, you're not managing. I think the other piece of that is, you know, I often hear like LGBT people say to me, well, I don't want to talk about my, you know, private life at work. And it's like, fine, if you don't want to, you don't have to. But if I walk up to the water cooler on Monday morning and I'm a gay man, for example, and someone says, what did you and your wife do this weekend? You know, like they see my wedding ring and they say, what did you and your wife do this weekend? I've got a moment of, you know, decision there. And I just think it's a little bit naive for us to pretend that these conversations aren't happening every day at work all the time, right? We're just so attuned to them being about straight people and being about cis people that we don't realize the experience of people who are not straight and people who are not cis when these dialogues are happening around us.
Great answer, thank you. And we took the data down from this question, but just so we can to cover it, this pretty much tracks with what we were saying 2 years ago. It's about a quarter to a third who are acknowledging gender identity and tracking it, and a lot more who are saying that they've got plans to do so in the next 12 months. And you never know when those next 12 months are going to get there, because we don't know when the next COVID or other big major explosion is going to happen. So let's see, let's go to the next question. I want to get through these so we can have a little more other flow on the conversation. So is your organization's LGBTQ plus employee resource groups, ERGs, VRGs, consulted in identifying and defining emerging policy needs, such as addressing gender identity? And while people are asking that, I was wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit about Accenture's LGBTQ plus ERGs, and you know, what are some of the issues that they're working on? You know, you told us they helped you build the Pride data that you're collecting, but what else would they be working on right now?
Sure. So at Accenture, we have we call this our pride community. We have our pride at Accenture community we have networks across 90 of our 120 countries. If there isn't one yet, it's because someone hasn't come forward to address it. And we always support new networks being formed and emerging. We actually just had a couple of new ones. And one of the things to think about that for us is they're at different levels of maturity, not only in their own development, but also perhaps countries and cultures are at different levels of maturity in the conversation around LGBTQI people and the dialogue, right? So when we look at how they engage with us and how they engage with each other in the communities, it can be at different places. And I'll just give you an example. So in the US and Canada, one of our very mature markets, right? We just had the employee resource group finish running what we call L3, which is LGBTQ Leaders Learning. And it's a leadership development course that the ERG runs. And it brings in a couple of hundred emerging leaders from, kind of manager to senior manager within the firm who are on a track for promotion and who are members of the greater LGBTIQ plus and ally community. And so it's a little bit of, it's an affinity cohort, but it's a leadership development course and really addressing standard leadership development content, but then also what does this mean at the intersection of your identities and how do you leverage some of that in your leadership? So that's a really mature effort, right? Like that's something for a mature group to be doing and along the conversation. By the way, how you get identified and invited to that program is through self-identification, or one way is through self-identification. On the other hand, I'll give you, in our Poland group right now, they're working with a local NGO on supporting members of the greater LGBTIQ community who are refugees from Ukraine. And that support looks like how we not only kind of relocation settlement support, but also we stood up a skilling center in our Polish office in Warsaw in order to provide skilling and jobs to Ukrainian refugees. And the ERG is making sure that members of our community, the Pride community, have those opportunities as well. So there's, you can look at whatever's happening in a particular environment and how the ERG or network can be engaged can really differ depending on what's happening. Now, in terms of our policies and practices, we solicit the input of our people always. And, that can be through more formal focus groups that we organize depending on what's happening. It could be more informal where we'll solicit a group of members of the ERG about something, but it really is an ongoing dialogue. For example, right now we're looking at all of our family formation benefits in the US, so surrogacy, fertility, reproductive preservation, et cetera. And we're getting feedback from our community as part of that, but also from some other communities as well.
That's great. We always name that as a best practice, is to make sure that you're tapping into those ERG groups no matter what kind of policies or practices that you're looking to roll out, just to make sure that you're covering all the bases and making sure that everybody's included in decisions. So thank you for that. So of course, a lot of companies have their LGBTQ plus ERGs helping to identify these kind of gender identity policies. Several more planning to do so. I think this number actually has crept quite a bit higher than the last time we checked with this survey. Got one more. Oh, go right ahead.
Interject something there, Eric, that I think is really critical. you know, from my work at HRC and, you know, and also at Accenture, you know, if you are specifically thinking about transgender and non-binary inclusion, you know, depending on, you know, how much work has been done there, your ERG may or may not have a strong voice of that particular part of the alphabet, if you will, right? And so, you know, it's important to understand, you know, that we need people who are actually non-binary and actually transgender as part of that, and not just the Pride community as a whole. And, you know, it's like, how do we look in between the letters as well and make sure that we're hearing those voices? And I would say, you know, I've worked with many a company where there's like one out non-binary person and they're asking that person their opinion on everything. And I'm like, okay, you're also gonna have to go a little wider than that, right? Because that person is, you know, not everybody's an expert on ID&E, and not, you know, they're an expert on their own experience, but not necessarily the experience of the community as in a larger sense. So that's where you need to leverage your partners, whether it's, you know, here in the US, it's HRC or Out and Equal, or, you know, one of those organizations, or around the globe, whether it's Stonewall or Workplace Pride, you know, leverage partners too, because and that's true for other communities as well, because you need, you know, you want to make sure you get a full picture, right? And you want to listen to your people, but you also may not have a big enough listening pool there, right?
Yeah, I've heard that with some other ERG groups too, where, you know, that not everyone is going to be representative of the entire community. Sometimes you might only hear certain things that are pushed from leaderships in those communities, but it isn't really reflective of the base of the communities. So yeah, it really is good to go broad when you're trying to build a policy like that and be inclusive of everyone. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, so our last poll question. Good. Does your organization encourage the use of pronouns in any of the following communications? So we have emails, employee data collection, customer-facing positions, whether asking customers or giving customers your pronouns. Same with recruiting with applicants or candidates. In company directories, in conference names tags, or in others. So this is a follow-up. I have a follow-up slide to this that kind of shows how this was answered in our previous study in 2020, and a link if anybody wants to see any of the other responses that we got from that particular study.
Hey, Eric, question for you while the audience is answering the poll questions. Would company business cards qualify as other in this survey?
Do business cards?
Would that count as other in the survey?
Yeah, actually, I think that's just one that I missed putting on the slide when I was making it up. That would be a big one.
But if business cards, they would check other, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Consider that the same as an email signature now in a lot of ways too. Yeah. Or Zoom identification. Like I've noticed that Zoom will drop mine occasionally. I'm never sure why, but you know, it should be up there all the time too. So, and so just to ask you, Beck, why is pronoun sharing so important?
Well, you know, we could talk about sharing. I think there are a lot of different views on sharing, and we talk about that in a second. I think what I would start with, or the foundation, is similar to what I was saying about data a minute ago, this like endeavoring to see people as they see themselves. And when I think about using the right name and pronoun for someone, I just come down to fundamental respect, right? Like if someone says, call me Sam, and I call them George, like, what does that mean? You know, I'm just disrespecting them, right? They've said exactly how they want to be referred to. So, you know, for me, this language we use for people, you know, is a very basic form of respect. Mm-hmm. And so pronoun sharing mechanisms, whether it's in emails or Zoom handles or the directory or whatever, is a way for people to say, this is how I see myself, and I would like you to respect that. And so, and so for me, it's a communication mechanism of a self-expression and a way to make it easier for people to know that so that they don't have to guess. And, I guess the thing I would say to that is, people identify all sorts of ways and they express themselves in different ways. And we have kind of societal standards around gender that says, if you kind of look like this, I'm supposed to use he. And if you kind of look like that, I'm supposed to use she. But really, those are all kind of educated guesses, if you will. And sometimes you're going to guess wrong because people feel differently inside than whatever you're evaluating. And so if you think about it that way, you're always guessing, then looking for these signals in shares is a way for you to not have to do that and make it really easy for you to refer to someone the way they would like that to be.
So I've heard a lot of people who argue that against pronoun sharing. They're just like, well, I'm obvious. I don't want to, they don't want it for themselves. It's not like they necessarily have a problem if somebody else shares their pronouns. But how do you have that conversation with people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, generally speaking, if you don't feel you need to share your pronouns, it's because your gender expression aligns with your gender identity. Right. And when people are guessing for you, they're guessing right. And maybe they're guessing right 100% of the time, right? And so for you, you never have that feeling of discomfort or disrespect or like, for me, when I was growing up, I'd be like, someone would go, oh, hey, ladies. And I'd be like, who are they talking to? It's like, it's not me. And so, I think if you feel that way, I think part of it is recognizing that you're coming from a place where that's not your experience. So one grain there would be, maybe think about being, putting shoes on the other foot there for a second and what that might feel like if you're a he and someone called you she all the time and just did, and you couldn't fix it. I think if you can do that, then you can get to a little bit of empathy to say, well, what harm does it do for me to share my pronouns here, right? It's no big harm either, right? I think the challenge is if only the queer people are sharing their pronouns, then it doesn't feel inclusive. It feels very othering. Like if I'm the only they and I'm the only one who has my pronouns, it talk about just not feeling like people are really trying to respect what's happening there. So I come at it a little bit from, can you put the shoe on the other foot and can you kind of empathize a little bit? And at the end of the day, is it, how much is it really taken off of you to do that? Now, also, if you don't want to, you don't want to. But I would hope that you do some effort to respect other people's pronouns. And that would be my guidance.
So Beck, let me just say one thing very quickly. So valuing everything that you're bringing to this conversation today. Eric, we've got 2 questions in the audience that I want to get to. So as you wrap this up, if you've got your chat screen on in front of you, Eric, Elizabeth has a question and AK Epinola has a question as well. Let's try to get those in while we have Beck.
Sure.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I can see them here if you want me to just to jump to them. So there's a question about intersectionality and collaboration across ERGs. Such a great question. I'm really excited. We're always encouraging and guiding and actually helping our ERGs to think about what intersectional dialogue looks like, whether it's from the people who hold multiple marginalized identities within their group or by partnering with other ERGs. Great example for our US Pride Month, our Pride ERG and our Interfaith ERG are collaborating on an event that looks at the intersection of LGBTIQ plus identities and identities of faith. And they have a Christian leader, a Muslim leader, and a Jewish leader as part of that discussion, who are coming from affirming practices to talk about what that looks like. And I think that that's a very beautiful and rich conversation that needs to be had, because a lot of people assume that if you are LGBTIQ plus, that you aren't a person of faith, and that's just not true. And so that's a great example of that. In the question that AK has about, do we insist people identify and share pronouns at the beginning of the meeting? I would say no. And the reason is, you can have that practice. You can say, let's go around the room. Let's use our name, our pronouns, our role, and where we are sitting or whatever. But if someone skips their pronoun, what I say is, don't go, pronouns, you forgot your pronouns, right? Because you never know what someone's going through in that particular moment. Maybe they are experimenting with a new pronoun. Maybe they're not ready to say it. Maybe they want to come out as a they, but it's too scary. And if they say he, it feels too bad, right? So they're just kind of skipping over. So I say it's a great practice to set up places for people to share. And it's important not to then pressure it, right? And because that doesn't take into account that people may be in different stages of their journey.
Beck, keep going. There's another question. I'm so appreciative of the audience engagement. So keep going. There's the last one from Elizabeth.
Sure. Elizabeth asks about people who just prefer to use their name of choice and really kind of getting away from pronouns. That's definitely more challenging. And I know a few people who have experimented with that. And the reality is, pronouns are for about conversations that happen about you, not with you. And so it's almost really hard to know whether someone's honoring that or not, unless your allies or other people are really kind of helping to keep that on track. In order, I think, someone who feels that way, similar to other pronouns, they're going to have to find a way to communicate that. I've seen an email signature that says, just call me Ben, instead of having pronouns, it's like, my name is Ben and just call me Ben, and it's definitely challenging though, because our language, more than anything else, is a matter of habit. And so the way that we speak and the pronouns that we use are habitual, and it takes a lot of effort, not only to learn to use they interchangeably or to learn to use a new pronoun for someone who's transitioning. It takes a lot of effort to just use names as well. So we've got to A, communicate it, and B, we need to give space and grace for people to work on using it.
Outstanding. Beck, thank you so much. This has been so insightful. I realize we are at the top of the hour, in fact, 1 minute over. I just want to say, I think your background with HRC really prepared you well for this role at Accenture. You're doing some great things with some serious best practices. Thank you again. Would love to have you back if you're willing to come on with us. I think the audience really enjoyed you today. So thank you, Eric. I know I usurped your last poll. My profound apologies, but I just really wanted this audience to continue to hear everything possible from Beck. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for being part of this today. Great discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric and Jackie and Nina, for having me. And thanks everybody on the line. It's just tremendous. And happy Pride, everyone.
Yes.
Happy Pride. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.